You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Hello and welcome. We are back. It is another 3-Mod Pod. I am John Kurtz, joined by Derek Young of K-State Online fame, Cole Manbeck, former K-State beat writer for the Manhattan Mercury. We're talking about a bounce-back win for K-State. They go 1-1 with the back-to-back home games with Texas and TCU. Looks dominating by the end of the scoreboard, 82-61. Cats held TCU in arm's length basically the entire way, led almost wire to wire, but it was a fairly close game, 6-minute game with just a couple minutes to go before K-State exploded on, I believe, a 15-0 run there to get the big lead at the end of the game. So all's well that ends well. It was really fun. It was another pretty good environment in Bramlage Coliseum, I would say, last night. And those of you students that weren't there, because there were a few students, that was the only spot where I would have any qualms with the attendance. And everybody who was still there was very loud and rowdy, so it still made for a great atmosphere. But I'd have to imagine the only excuse for the students who did not fill the wraparound sections, Cole and DY, has to be that they were simply too busy enjoying their Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon and 360 vodka at home. That is really the only explanation there. I get it. It's 8 o'clock tip. So you wanted to just kick back and fire it up while you had your math homework going or something like that. But that is clearly what's happened because it's taking the nation by storm. Get your 360 vodka, get your Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon, support Holiday Distillery, the people that support us, great K-Staters. So we appreciate them. But kind of set the stage here, guys, for fun night, much needed night, and just a win that kind of gives you a sigh of relief after blowing the Texas game and running into a rough stretch here that basically every team in the Big 12 has run into. Showed some signs last night that this is not going to be anything that is crazy long in terms of a losing streak or just extended poor play here. Nice to get everybody back on track.
Yeah, it was. It's sometimes you just need something good to happen, and I think that's what happened for Kansas State. And once that kind of unfolds, then the ball kind of rolls downhill, so to speak, and you kind of return to form or kind of get back to the way you were playing. I thought. Now, it wasn't for 40 minutes or even maybe like extended stretches, but I thought there were times where we saw some of the basketball that we remember when they were, jumped out to that 6-1 Big 12 start. And then they would also remember that bad basketball that lost 3 Big 12 games in a row. And then you would see like I think kind of a comfortable lead at times go back down to like 3 or 4 just because they would return to really sloppy basketball in the offensive end. And I think that's really my only problem because the defense really turned up last night. I thought that was the best the defenses looked in quite a while aside from a couple instances. And then offensively, if they shot better, they probably win that game by 30. I mean, they just couldn't put the ball in the bucket for most of the night, especially in the first half. There was a lid on that rim. So I really like what I saw from the offense. Got great looks. The only problem is you didn't make as much as you probably should have, and you're still turning the ball over way too much. I know they won that department against TCU last night because they forced TCU into so many turnovers. But, I mean, in general, I thought he looked better. But we're looking at, I think, the 6th straight game where Marquis Nowell has 5 or more turnovers.
Yeah, it was a big win, obviously. You'd lost 3 in a row in Big 12 play, and you're on your home court, and you really can ill afford to lose back-to-back games at home. And especially in this league, every game is so challenging. And I thought K-State, when TCU made runs in that game, it was encouraging that K-State responded because it would have been easy to go, here we go again. Started the second half, K-State's up 8, TCU hits them with a 6-0 run. Pulls within 2, but K-State had a couple of big responses in the second half. And then TCU pulls it within 65-59 in the second half as well. And K-State hits them with that huge run that you talked about, John. It felt like in the blink of an eye, all of a sudden we look up and in 2 or 3 minutes, it's a 20-point game. It went from 6 to 20. And so that was big. But in the grand scheme of things, just getting a win against a top 20 team to separate yourself a little bit in the standings from TCU, which was tied with you at 6-4 in league play. Now you're tied for second with Kansas and the Big 12 standings, and Iowa State, Texas, obviously at the top at 7-3 or 8-3 for Texas, 7-3 for Iowa State going into tonight. So really big win. And by the way that K-State won, K-State jumped a lot in the efficiency rankings. So big jump in KenPom. K-State went from the 26th ranked team in the KenPom standings to number 19. And then the net rankings this morning that came out, K-State jumped 5 spots from 21 to 16, which is really a significant jump this time of year. And now the Wildcats have 6 quad 1 wins, which only 11 teams in America, including K-State, have 6 quad 1 wins or more. Only 6 teams in the country have more quad 1 wins than K-State. So Wildcats continue to put together a very impressive resume.
Yeah, I'm all here for
I don't love the net. Sorry, John. I don't love the net and KenPom. I think for that reason, because you had to win. It's like a 21-point win over TCU without 2 of their better players at home. I don't understand that part, I guess.
Well, Cole and I were sitting there with an extra rooting interest at the end of the game because of this exact scenario, margin of victory for the net. So it was 17-2 in total, the full run to end the game there. Scoring 17 in the last 19 was a blast. After like a mildly, I would say I was like, mildly frustrated a little bit at the point where it's a 6-point game coming down the stretch. You're like, yeah, this has been okay, but like, let's finish this off here. And boy, did they. You got an insane logo 3 from Marquis Nowell, who hit a couple of really deep ones. One in the first half or earlier on when they were trying to go 2 for 1, first half, I think, right?
Yep.
And then the one late in the game when he's just bombing it because basically he has to from like halfway into the power cat. It was an insane shot. And you hope that gets Keys going. I know, yes, he did have 6 turnovers still, but it felt like a game in which he was more under control, didn't try to do quite as much. Felt like a throttled down a bit in a good way, Marquis Nowell, that they kind of need. So from that standpoint, I'm going to take some positive with Keys and what they got there.
Yeah, I mean, like I think about it, John. One of the things you and I talked about watching the game sitting together is he was finishing at the rim and taking more shots at the rim. Lately, I feel like Marquis has been too unselfish when he drives and looking to dish, and the defenses have started to adjust, and they're looking for that kick out pass or that pass and getting their hands on the ball, and that's where some of the turnovers have come from. And last night he had 3 or 4 times where he made some difficult shots at the rim, especially one of the biggest baskets in the game was the TCU had pulled it to 40-38, and Marquis goes down and drives on Damian Bow, who's a terrific defender, and he's 6'4", big size advantage, point guard, big point guard, and Marquis hangs in the air and finishes through him for a layup to push it back out to 4, and then K-State hit him with that run where they get up by 10. That's what started that run where they get it out to 48-38, and they started really playing hard and in a frenzy and got TCU to turn the ball over. And so I thought Marquis was better last night. And I felt bad for him on Saturday against Texas because he's a really good player, and K-State wouldn't be where they are without him. And he's a finalist for the Bob Cousy Award for best point guard in America. And he just hit a rough stretch. And K-State relies on him so heavily. He's always got the ball in his hands. It's a very difficult position, and so. And he's not the biggest guy in the world. It's got some limitations when it comes to that. So really happy to see Marquis have some good moments last night. And I think those threes will hopefully get him going again. He was 3 of 16 from 3 in his previous 2 games. He goes 3 of 7 last night from beyond the arc. So I agree with you. I thought he was better. And now he's the single season assist record at Kansas State with 7 Big 12 games to go. So just a heck of a season by Marquis.
He had 3 gashes on his eye for it as well. Saw him in press conference. He's got like 3 cuts, so he's probably getting banged up a lot more in there than what's being called as well.
Yeah, there was no foul call on that play. I think Cole, you and I remember looking at that and being like, I mean, he's literally like holding his eye over here. Like he's bleeding. He clearly got, hey, I digress. Nothing too. The only complaints that we have with the officials last night, Cole, would you say were just everybody is too charge happy, particularly when it comes to Keyontae Johnson? Like, I mean, my God, I won't complain really about the overall officiating in the game. Maybe just bad both ways. I thought way too many charges. And Keyontae has a target the size of the entire Octagon of Doom on his back right now every time he's out there. Like, these officials are just hunting anything that he's going to do that would resemble an offensive foul. And teams have gotten to the point now where they know, just flop, just go down. Like, if he makes any contact with his arm at all, like his forearm, just go flying. And the officials are like, wait. The one that made me mad was his third foul because the whistle came so fast, and that was such minimal contact there that it just, you knew that he was looking exactly for that. And instead of getting like a bit of star treatment, which I think you see for guys like Jalen Wilson throughout the league. Keyontae is getting the complete opposite treatment of that. And it seems just like a freaking birthright for these officials to get him 2 fouls by the first media timeout. It's frustrating. It's really frustrating.
The one that actually really got me was the very first one, when they call the hook on him driving when he's getting bodied by Emmanuel Miller. And I'm like, you really have to be reaching. Like, that happens all the time. You have to really, really be looking close to want to call that. And with all the contact that's allowed in these games to call that one was very agitating. And the third one you mentioned, Shahada Wells, he's a 6-foot guard trying to guard Keyontae. So he's got a mismatch. And of course, Keyontae being bigger and stronger, making just a new normal move is going to send him flying a little bit. And you can't call that. So I digress. I mean, I thought Doug Sermons, I'm a big Doug Sermons fan right now. Thank goodness for him. He overturned those clowns like 4 times on calls. I thought he had a great game. And actually, I thought K-State probably got, beside from those charges, John and DY, I thought K-State got maybe a favorable whistle last night. There were some plays at the rim. Keyontae probably could have got his 4th foul on a loose ball situation where a guy tripped over him and they didn't call it. And then TCU went down and there maybe was some contact at the rim. They let it go and TCU missed. And it was nice to that I wasn't complaining as much about the officiating, so you didn't have to listen to that quite as much last night, John.
It's true. Had to keep this guy a little bit calm, but Doug Sermons was great. It was not just like him overruling his crew sometimes, but him putting Jamie Dixon in his place. And I mean, Tang for that matter too, at one point early in the game, but a couple times he literally showed Jamie Dixon the motion of what his player did to travel at one point. That was funny. So kudos to Dougie boy. Where does he rank on the list of favorite officials, Cole?
Right now, he's number 1. He was not up there at all in the past, but that was a heck of a performance by Doug last night. Great job.
Can I get a top 3 Big 12 official power ranking from you?
I can't think of 3 that are good, but I would probably have Sermons, and even though I know Higgins gets maligned, but that's because everybody knows him, I would have Higgins in the top 3. Yeah, if I'm on the road, I would rather have in an intimidating atmosphere. I'd usually rather have John Higgins because he's been through it, and guys like him and Sermons are arrogant and they have a big ego and they don't get intimidated by those crowds. And so I would have him right up there, and I would have Kip Kissinger and Chance Moore and those guys at the very bottom of college basketball officiating. So Jerry Pollard, Jamie Luckey, Gary Maxwell. I'll get my rankings put out, but they would be at the very bottom.
Yeah, that could become your thing. You could become Twitter famous. The official rankings, like the ref rankings.
A new top 25 each week from me for college basketball refs. Here's who had a good week. All right.
And then you can pivot it to basically being like the sickos committee, but for Big 12 basketball, or just for basketball officiating, like college basketball officiating. And you can just take obscure clips that people send you. And that's how you get big. Elon just said that he's going to start rewarding engagement with money on Twitter at some point here. So this is a business plan that we're fleshing out right now.
Well, John, you're gonna be rich with some of the trolling you're gonna be effective with on Twitter.
Yeah. Got a little carried away last night with one Kansas fan in particular who was complaining about Keyontae Johnson, and realized once I went to his profile, he had literally tweeted during the Kansas game yesterday, ban the charge. So, couldn't resist there. But what do they do? I mean, have there been many questions about that in the press conferences about how the officials are calling this, and if they feel like he's being a little bit unfairly targeted here, or what you have to do to change and keep that from happening?
I think if Coach Tang was, an honest individual, or wasn't afraid to get in trouble during his press conferences, he would probably verbalize his frustration with the officials much more when it comes to officiating Keyontae Johnson. In another group chat I was in last night, I equated it a little bit to the LeBron James treatment, and also a little ironic. We do it after the night he broke the points record, so shout out to him, because of course he's listening to 3 Mall. But when LeBron's in the NBA, he's so much powerful than everyone else that it looks like he's just beating the crap out of everyone. But it's just him playing basketball, and he gets penalized and punished for being more powerful than everybody else. And I think that's what we're seeing from Keyontae Johnson right now. But when Jerome Tang's asked about it, he said he's not really over penetrating or doing anything like that. They, as a coaching staff, have to recognize the spots where the double is going to come from and put him in a better position to have him be isolated without a double. It gets trickier and trickier with every game because teams get more creative in how they want to defend them, and everyone's a little bit different. But they kind of put it on them. But I know if you hooked them up to a lie detector test, I think he'd be as pissed off about it as us.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Because I'm tired of it. Big 12 officials. I'm tired of it. Always foul trouble every single game. The poor guys having to navigate through.
But if you want to look at the bright side, guys, so the last 2 games, Keyontae's minutes, thanks to those charges, has been cut to 25 minutes a game. Now, you would have loved him, to win both of them with him. But, I always think about legs as we get later in the season. And, they found a way to win last night with Keyontae not having to play 34, 35 minutes. He's only on the court for 25. So, will help his legs hopefully later in the season that he's only played 25 a game the last 2. So, and he's playing more efficient, last 2 games, 6 of 10 against Texas, 4 of 8 last night. And again, it's just funny because you feel like he's not having a great game and you look at the final box score and he's got 14 points and 7 rebounds. And that's pretty darn solid.
That's why I wanted to say we're probably not recognizing it because he's getting into foul trouble repeatedly lately. So we haven't seen him on the floor as much, but he actually was a little mired, at least from an efficient standpoint, in a little bit of a slump himself. I think he's completely out of his. He's really feeling himself on the offensive end. So I like what we're seeing out of Keyontae Johnson. Last night, he was flirting with his first potential game not scoring in double figures. He scored in double figures every game this year. So he cut it close last night. I think it was about 5 minutes left when he got his 10th point. I think it was on a three-pointer. The only issue, I like what you're talking about with the minutes thing, Cole, with Keyontae Johnson, 25 minutes each of the past 2 games. Here's the thing, though. Kansas State can't afford to have none of Marquis Nowell or Keyontae Johnson on the floor at the same time. So it's also required Marquis Nowell to probably play more than they would like.
Yeah, no, Marquis played 39 minutes last night. You're right. It does take a toll on him, and I do worry about that a little bit, especially when, Marquis always has the ball in his hands, and, that just wears you. It's more exhausting. Now, I thought last night they maybe took Marquis without the ball in his hands, didn't make him the primary ball handler on a few occasions. Desi Carter brought it up, and they let Marquis kind of roam without the basketball on a few different possessions, and I like that. Like, I like getting Desi the ball a little bit more and getting him going downhill. I thought he played a really nice game. Going back to Keyontae, 6 of 9 from 3 in his last 3 games, which I think is a big thing. We talked about it a couple weeks ago that he needed to get back to being able to be a little more effective from 3. He went through a stretch where I think he was like 3 of 19 from beyond the arc. And, he's a solid 3-point shooter. He's close to 40% on the year. And now 6 of 9 in those last 3 games. And that'll just enable him to be able to drive more as teams were sagging off a little bit and open up some driving lanes for him. So, yeah, it was a fun night. And, as you look at the previous matchup in Fort Worth to really some of the biggest differences in this game, in the game in Fort Worth, TCU had 54 points in the paint to K-State's 40. And last night, K-State outscores them 40-38 in the paint. That's a 16-point differential that TCU had at the paint. And then second chance points. I mean, TCU is one of the best offensive rebounds in the country. K-State outscores them 11-3 on second chance points when you compare that to 20-8 in Fort Worth. So a 17-point difference. And fast break points, 32-13 at TCU. Last night, 10-7 in favor of TCU. 22-point difference. I mean, everything that went well at TCU shot 19 free throws in Fort Worth. Last night, K-State only shot 7. Last night, K-State shoots 23 and makes 19 of them. They shoot 13. K-State was just more physical and played tougher in that game. And I thought defensively, K-State was pretty darn good. And I was actually a little bit surprised to see in KenPom that K-State now is number 21 in the country in defensive efficiency. So they're a solid defensive team.
Well, we've gone an awful long way within this pod without mentioning the name Taiki Green, who stepped up and was the guy off the bench for the Cats last night. 13 points, 9 rebounds, which, I mean, the way he defends and rebounds, K-State can really use that. he can also finish. He's very springy, and we got to see him go up and jam a sick alley-oop lob from Keyontae Johnson, but also just be the guy there on the receiving end of some great passes for layups and dunks virtually the entire game. But guys have had these sorts of moments. I mean, it's been Desi Sills at times. Cam Carter has had his moments with games like that. Now, Taiki Green, a little more unexpected resource for that. But on a night when Naquan Tomlin and Ish Massoud were not giving you a lot, Taiki Green at the 4, we heard Jerome Tang talk about that after the game, how this guy played guard at Stony Brook. He was playing the 4 for us tonight. He stepped in and filled a huge, huge role.
Yeah, a lot of it had to do with kind of going away from some other guys. Ish Massoud got 4 minutes in the first half, never played again. Naquan Tomlin's defense was leaving a little bit to be desired, I think. So Taiki Green got the call, and he answered the bell when his name was called. So shout out to him for doing that. 13 or 14 points, I believe he scored. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to expect that on a nightly basis from him or anything of that sort. It was 13, but I do think that he can kind of be that finisher guy if he's put in that rule, at least, be able to clean things up a little bit or just catch some lobs, because I think that's probably his game. You look at his free throw numbers and his 3-point numbers. Look, he kind of revamped those last year at Stony Brook, but they reverted again at Kansas State. Don't want to put him on blast here, but I'm pretty sure he's under 30% free throw shooter in Big 12 play right now. So that's pretty brutal. He's not a shooter right now, but he can finish at the rim, and he can play defense, and he can rebound. I thought the biggest thing, even though his line looks great with 13 points and 9 rebounds, I thought the biggest thing he provided was just a little bit of competitive spirit, energy, and those kinds of things do equate itself to rebounding and defense, and that's what Kansas State needed.
Yeah, I just thought he played incredibly hard. And, I mean, he always plays hard, but I thought he brought a lot of energy to the floor. I think of a play where David Gasson actually intercepted the pass where TCU was trying to push it down the court, but Taiki shot out of a cannon. He was going to get it if Gasson didn't get it for the steal. And, he got after it on the offensive glass. And, look, the thing about Taiki that I really like is, and really this whole roster is, these guys are so team-oriented. Like, it would have been easy for Taiki to pout. Like, he didn't come to K-State to play 10 minutes a game and kind of be in the role that he's in. You look at the last 6 games, Taiki's scored a combined 3 points and has a combined 7 rebounds in those games. In the previous 2 contests, he played a total of about 2.5 minutes combined. And this is a guy that transferred in that started 88 games in his college basketball career, had scored more than 1,100 points in his career, averaged 14 points and 8 rebounds a game last year at Stony Brook. I don't think he came in probably with the vision that he would be a reserve that had 2-3 minutes a game in several games, but he didn't pout, and he went to Jerome Tang, and Jerome Tang told the story last night that he went to Tang and just wanted to see what he could do to help the team. And Jerome Tang mentioned a story earlier this year when Ish Massoud was sitting on the bench a lot and wasn't playing, and he was willing to listen to Ish and open his ears and listen to the feedback from his player. And then Ish had some big moments right after that. And so you got different guys that are willing to still be fully invested. They're not pouting or sulking, and they go out there and do the things that they do. And Taiki, showed that he can really be a nice 4, for this team, because he's got like a 7-foot wingspan for a 6'4" guard that can play down at the 4, and he's physical, he's strong, he's got a huge vertical. I think it depends a lot on the team they're playing and the matchups. Whether it's Ish getting more minutes or Taiki, but it just shows you that you've got another piece that you can plug in there at that 4 spot and do some effective things. And I think he's a really nice defender and rebounder. So I think he brings some valuable things to the floor, and you continue to just show that different guys on this roster can step up night in and night out.
Hey, I think we've learned a lot about that as the season has gone along. They've got places they can go if it's not going to be Marquis and Keyontae in full force every single night. Let's take a bigger picture look at what this win means, where K-State's at, KenPom net, all those sorts of things, and what the tournament resume is looking like. We'll do that coming up next. Back here on 3MA, John, Cole, Derek, all with you. Cole is our resident guy who keeps up with KenPom, the net, where K-State's at, and all these metrics. He was updating me on that as soon as we were getting into the car. Actually, shout out to KSU_fan. Didn't he say the Cats are up by 7 spots? 7 spots in KenPom. I got
yeah. They moved from 26.
19.
Yeah,
K-State in the top 20.
yeah. They moved from 26 to 19 last night in the in Ken Palm, and from 21 to 16 in the net ranking. So considerable jump. And Nevada actually had a really nice win on the road by 1 point last night at New Mexico, which was the number 37 team in the net. Nevada's now got 8 quad 1 or quad 2 wins combined, and they're really solidifying their NCAA tournament resume. And it would take a major collapse for Nevada to fall out of a quad 1 win for K-State. So it looks like they'll probably stay in that quad 1 status. Oklahoma State is a team to watch. They're 35th in the net. You know, K-State beat them in Bramlage. That's a team that could sneak into that quad 1 status for K-State and become an extra quad 1 win. But I mentioned earlier, there's only 6 teams in the country with more quad 1 wins than Kansas State right now. And they put together a heck of a resume. Lenardi hasn't put out an updated bracket. He had, as of yesterday, entering the day, K-State is the top 4 seed, and he had TCU as a 3. We obviously know that's at the very least going to flip after last night. So K-State's probably currently a 3 seed.
On Oklahoma State, real quick here, Cole. Oklahoma State's Avery Anderson having wrist surgery and out indefinitely. How big of an impact is that going to have on that game?
Well, he's preseason first team All Big 12. He hasn't had as good of a year as he probably would have liked, but still over 11 points a game, over 3 assists per game, a really good defensive player as well. You know, they've got Bryce Thompson, Cisse, some other guys that have stepped forward. I still think they're solid. They didn't have Avery Anderson on Saturday against TCU, and they were able to win. But I think it's an impact. I mean, it definitely doesn't hurt that K-State's got him in a couple weeks, and in all likelihood, he will not be playing in that game. So it's one less big piece for that OSU team.
The only thing I would comment would be that Kent State is running into some injury luck here, right? You get to play TC at home without Mike Miles. Maybe Oklahoma State doesn't have Avery Anderson in a couple weeks when you get them in Stillwater. And something to look at, I think Cole mentioned in our group chat, is Texas Tech. They're pretty banged up right now. And Kent State plays there on Saturday. They might not have Fardal Mack, who wasn't really good against the Wildcats anyways when they hosted the Red Raiders at Bramlage Coliseum. But Pop Isaacs would be a big miss if he can't go against for Texas Tech against K-State on Saturday. And he, just by the looks of everything and the reports you hear, he might be farther away than AMAC. So I almost would be a little surprised if Pop did play on Saturday.
That would be massive. And this is a game that, I mean, I think is very intriguing, even though it is going on the road to play the last place team in the league. But let's get into some of that, talking K-State, Texas Tech, because DY started bringing us down this road, which is a fair one. Texas Tech is beat up. I think they're probably just beaten down a little bit right now. They got clubbed by Baylor the other night after being close at halftime, just destroyed in the second half. Now, we're recording this before they play their game tonight, which is against Oklahoma State, is it not? Is that who they're playing tonight? Anyway, they've got somebody tonight before the game on Saturday, which we know is sold out. So it could be a sellout, lively crowd, but I don't know if Tech loses again going into that game. Maybe that still kills some of the crowd and excitement, environment, atmosphere. DY, you've been the biggest champion here of the environment that Texas Tech has and how difficult it can be to play there. Iowa State blew a 23-point lead there and lost in overtime. So what are you expecting that K-State is going to get out of this Red Raiders team on Saturday?
Yeah, they're always going to – it's tough to play anyone on the road, I think, regardless of how things are kind of unfolding. I think everyone has enough pride to kind of put it out there at home and see what happens right now. If you're a team like Texas Tech and the first 5 or 10 minutes of that game don't go well, the crowd tunes out and the team loses a little bit of interest just because they know they're not necessarily an NCAA tournament team, I think that's probably where it comes into play. Other than that, I think you'll get a team that's at least playing inspired to begin the game and a crowd that's maybe a little juiced up to begin the game. So the first 5 or 10 minutes of that contest in Lubbock, I would imagine, tells us the complete story of how that game will wind up. There's a good chance that Texas Tech isn't all that interested, but that's going to depend on how K-State plays in those first 5 to 10 minutes. But, man, Texas Tech without Pop, the way I just think that kind of it hurts them quite a bit. Any team that's going to be without their point guard, they're going to be down a few pegs. And if they were to lose, on Wednesday night again, I think that does, even though it's sold out, I think that does depress some of the turnout because, as you know, a team can sell out a game, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to be there. So I think you'll probably run into that problem if you're Texas Tech, if you were to lose on Wednesday night.
I mean, I certainly think not having Amik and especially Isaac is a big factor. Now, they have been playing without both for a couple weeks now, and they beat Iowa State without both of them. But it felt kind of like a fluky type comeback that they had against the Cyclones, and Iowa State kept turning it over. It does limit their options. Like they have Kevin O'Banner and then Davion Harmon and Jalen Tyson. So they have kind of a big three, but I mean, they're not elite scorer. Harmon's a good scorer and O'Banner can score, but if you can lock those guys down, they don't have much else to turn to. They're young. They got a lot of youth that they're putting out there on the court that aren't particularly offensively developed yet. Kerwin Walton is a guy that can get hot from three, but other than that, there's not a lot of pieces on that team if those two are out. And I think Daniel Bacho, too, their other big, who took the cheap shot on David Gasson in Manhattan in the ribs, he has only been playing about 11, 12 minutes in the last couple of games and hasn't looked good at all. And I think he's playing banged up, too. So that's certainly a factor. They don't have a lot that if Amik doesn't play, they don't have a lot that can hurt you on the inside. They'll try to post O'Banner, try to get him in there. But other than that, not a lot. So it's an interesting spot because, like DY said, I think if K-State can get off to a good start, you can suck that crowd out of the game, any life that they have, especially if they lose here tonight on Wednesday night against Oklahoma State and Stillwater. You're talking about a team that's 1-10 in the Big 12. They announced that sellout right after they beat Iowa State. The energy was flowing a little bit more after that, and now they'll potentially be off 3 straight losses again since that game occurred. So does that suck some of those people out from attending the game and going to United Spirits Supermarket Arena? I don't know, but yeah, it's a big spot for K-State because, it's a very winnable road game. Anytime you can win on the road in this league is huge. Heck, it still would count as a quad 1 road win. Now it's going to be teetering on the brink of quad 1, quad 2 because they're 71st in the net. But top 75 in the net would be a quad 1 win on the road. So another resume builder, a nice piece to have. And to get to 8-4 in the league with 3 home games remaining is significant. And Oklahoma right after that. So winnable game. You'd love to go 2-0 this week, and you'd be talking about a K-State team that jumps probably back into the top 10 in the country and the rankings. And, another big week next week with winnable games at OU and then Iowa State and a revenge spot in Manhattan.
Really the thing, right? You're in this stretch of 4 games that are as winnable as any that you've had in a very long time with the game at Tech. And again, no, not disrespecting Tech at all. Absolutely a game K-State could lose. But when you follow that up with a road trip to Oklahoma, who's really fallen off and seemingly struggling right now. Iowa State, they're a different kind of team on the road and bringing them into Bramlage. It's a game that you're going to need to go get. So this is a stretch where D-Wan, I'd be curious your thoughts here because Cole and I were kind of discussing this. I mean, I think if you're trying to win the league, probably need to go 4-0. I mean, like maybe 3-1 can keep you in that enough, but this would be the stretch. If you're going to start really ripping some things off, going 4-0 through here would put you, I think, firmly back into the league race. If you don't win the next 3, then we're maybe sitting here talking about like 10-8, 11-7 sort of a deal.
No, I would agree because let's say you say 3-1, so that'd be 2-1 the rest of the way. That put you at 9-5. And I don't know that you feel great about going 3-1 in the last 4, and that's probably worst case scenario to win the league. So if you're talking Big 12 championship implications here and what it takes to do that and to give yourself maybe a margin for error when it does toughen up just a bit more again at the back end stretch, which includes a game in Stillwater and Morgantown, 2 places where are going to be tougher to win at than either of Lubbock or Norman. I think you have to win both in Lubbock and Norman, and you can't lose both to Iowa State, right? Especially you can't lose at home to Iowa State when they're, Jekyll and Hyde home and away. The biggest difference for a program between the way they play at home and between the way they play on the road is Iowa State. It's typically that way. It's especially that way this year. So I am kind of with you. Now you can go 2-1 and finish this stretch with 3-1 and still feel like you had a good year. But if you want to be in that Big 12 championship hunt, which I think some people were starting to count K-State out once they fell to 6-4 and had lost 3 straight Big 12 games to Kansas, Texas, and Iowa State. if you want to get back in that hunt, I think winning the next 3 is probably required, and it's gettable, to be honest. I mean, Kansas State, you correct me if I'm wrong, probably a favorite the next 3 games. I know they're playing on the road, but I think they'll be favored at Texas Tech. They're on the road, but I think they'll be favored at Oklahoma. They'll be favored at home against Iowa State for sure. So I just look, and I've discounted all season, but you probably aren't going to win the Big 12 without winning in Norman. And they're probably going to hate me if any of them listen to this podcast, but that's the almost yearly season in and season out. That's the easiest win on the road in the Big 12. That atmosphere is non-existent.
It's a terrible atmosphere in Norman. I mean, I've covered games there as well, and it's brutal. I remember a couple times, 2009-10 season, K-State fans kind of overtook their arena down there back when Denny and Jake were on that Elite Eight team, and there were multiple thousand K-State fans down there, which was a lot of fun when K-State fans were traveling, supporting that team. And, that it's a very winnable game. Obviously OU's kind of Jekyll and Hyde too. They kill Alabama, in Norman. I think I like the spot for K-State because here's why. Oklahoma's next 2 games. Tonight at Baylor, Saturday against KU in Norman. So, I mean, did they start to wear down with that stretch that they're having and talking about possibly losing 2 more in a row, they'd be 12-13 overall. The NCAA tournament hopes pretty much dashed at that point for OU. Now, they do have some talented pieces. Sherfield, the Groves brothers, Jalen Hill's a good player. Uzan, a good freshman point guard for him. So they have some pieces that make you a little nervous, but the atmosphere is not going to be a problem for K-State. So if you go 3-0 in these next 3 games, make it a 4-0 stretch counting the TCU win last night, I think K-State gets a share of the Big 12 title. Because if you're telling me they're sitting at 10-4 in league play, I think 12-6 is going to get a share of the title. That means they got to go 2-2 in the last 4 games. I feel confident that they can do that. So you go 3-0 these next 3 games, then they're in a great spot because I really do think 12-6 is the magic mark to get a share of the Big 12 title. I don't think anyone gets 13-5. Texas, the one thing I'll urge caution on, people are going to think Texas might run away with this thing over the next couple weeks because you look at their schedule. West Virginia is playing in Austin on Saturday. Then Texas goes to Texas Tech. Then Oklahoma hosts Texas. Texas hosts Oklahoma. And then they get Iowa State in Austin. I mean, there's a very good chance Texas goes 4-0 over these next 4 games. And so they're going to be sitting possibly at 12-3 in league play. But then their final 3 games at Baylor, at TCU, and then KU in Austin. So they got a tough stretch. You got to hope they lose one of these next 4 games. And I think then they'll finish at 12-6. I think KU is going to drop a couple more, between road games at OSU, at TCU, at Texas, at OU. I don't think they'll lose that one, but I think they'll drop a couple road games still. So 12-6 is the number to get to. That means going 5-2 in these last 7.
Well, I'm with you. It seemed harder to believe early on the 12-6 thing when K-State was like 5-1, and we're feeling great and everything's rolling. But the realities of the league have set in for everybody. I mean, literally everybody at the top here has gone through these multiple game losing streaks and some rough skids, rough patches. Before I ask one quick football question to DY, any closing thoughts on basketball here?
DY, you got anything? You got nothing? The only thing I would say, I had jotted down a couple notes from the game last night in addition that I hadn't mentioned earlier, and I thought this was a big thing. And KSU fan had pointed this out in our group chat going into last night's game against TCU. But TCU is a bad 3-point shooting team. They're in the 300s in the country, shooting around 28-29% from 3. And I thought one of the big things with last night's game, TCU went 16 of 19 at the rim on shots at the rim. So an insane shooting percentage at the rim, but they went 9 of 38 on non-shots at the rim. So 24% everywhere from away from the basket. You forced them to shoot a lot of jump shots. And that was a big deal because in the game in Fort Worth, TCU went 26 of 38 on shots at the rim for 68%. Think about that. They shot 38 shots at the rim in Fort Worth and only 19 last night against K-State. So that was a big factor. in that game. And John, I think early in the game, you and me thought K-State was struggling at the rim, missing layups, etc. K-State goes 16 of 21 on shots at the rim last night, which surprised me. 76% compared to shooting 54% in the game in Fort Worth. So just wanted to throw out a couple of those numbers that I thought were big factors as well, because the shooting percentages weren't all that different. In Fort Worth, TCU was 46% from the floor, K-State 43%. Last night, K-State shot 46, TCU shot 44%, but TCU turned it over 19 times. You know, it's kind of roles flipped in this matchup in Manhattan, and K-State ends up handing TCU its worst defeat of the season. The biggest margin that the Horned Frogs had lost by was 9 against West Virginia. And again, we preface all that, they didn't have Mike Miles, but still an impressive win.
A little bit of frustration at the end of the game too. You know, the handshake line got a little testy there between some TCU assistant and Jareem. And then at the end of the game, Keyontae was barking with Emmanuel Miller. It was Miller, right? They were going after each other, and then Keyontae turned to the student section to have them come in and get the final word on that whole thing. I think TCU was pretty frustrated. Not sure there's a whole lot of love lost between the two coaches and teams.
That was great. You know, when Keyontae got to the students and was just basically like pointed at them, hey, shut him up. You know, Emmanuel Miller was talking a lot, and I don't know if that goes back. I told you on the drive home, John, Emmanuel Miller transferred from Texas A&M a couple years ago, so Keyontae probably matched up against him when he was at Florida, so they know each other probably a little bit. There was a lot of talk in there, and then that handshake line was interesting. DY, I don't know if you saw that unfold, but I was getting a little nervous something might happen. That took a couple minutes to kind of get everyone separated. It wasn't like anyone like throwing any haymakers, any punches, any physical contact, but there was a lot of talking going on in that handshake line.
Yeah, things heated up there for a minute. DY, before we let you go and get out of here, I was going to ask for an update on a wide receivers coach. You got a wide receivers coach update for me?
I wish I did. That thing is under. I wouldn't say it's under lock and key. I think it's in very much the infant stages, because I think the way that it unfolded, like Dad Ward, I think, you know, as soon as he was aware that he was going to get an Illinois opportunity, I think he probably jumped at the chance before they even got into the contract negotiations. So he was gone in a flash. So I don't think this is something that Kansas State was necessarily, like a lot of these times, you know, when this unfolds, a team's kind of aware of it for about a week before we even know. I don't think that was the case. And so I think it's kind of in its infant stages. And Chris Kleiman, the last few times, I think probably going to keep up with this, because it's been probably a winning formula for him. Been pretty thorough at his last few hires, right? Like it's taken a few weeks. He will interview maybe a couple different times, multiple candidates. So, I mean, I expect it to be done, you know, before the month of February is over, but I don't think they're going to necessarily rush into anything beyond that, especially now. Look, you can always recruit even in dead periods to a certain extent. With, you know, recruiting never is dead, but it is a dead period. So if you're going to be without a coach, the month of February is not a bad time for it to happen.
Can I throw out a name, DY? Just this is a complete guess. I know you've seen this name, Bobby Ingram, former NFL wide receiver. John won't like that he was the offensive coordinator at Wisconsin last season. And quarterbacks coach, but I'm just going to put that on. Gosh, why am I blanking on the head coach? Last year was a mess for Wisconsin. I'm blanking on the head coach's name, Paul Christ, who was removed. But Bobby Ingram, you know, his son just walked on to K-State, right? Trey Ingram, and
yeah, he did. Trey Ingram is a preferred walk-on in this class, so there is that connection. Besides that, I guess I don't know much about him. So
I just wanted to throw a name out.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting coincidence, but I don't think like Chris Kleiman was like signing his son as a preferred walk-on to eventually hire his dad as receivers coach. Now it's interesting that it's kind of unfolded that way, but I don't know that was ever part of the discussion.
And you think, I believe I saw you write this, but I don't. You think a lot of the popular names that are out there, the K-State, you know, the people that have to immediately run to, like, it's got to be someone with a K-State connection. those obvious names that we're seeing, Stanton Weber, Michael Smith, Cody Cook, unless I'm missing, Jake Waters, you're not anticipating those guys being the guy.
I'm not the first conversation that the conversations that I've had with anyone, maybe with a morsel of information, you kind of hear two things. A younger coach, so that would rule out maybe someone like Michael Smith, and probably a minority hire, just because of the position and the needing to maintain that balance on the staff. So that would eliminate some of those guys with Kansas State ties, of course.
Yeah, well, and something that I think they wanted to do with Tremaine Carroll when they made that hire too, and they're very conscious about the culture and all those things. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Plus, I think Kleiman is in a mode now where it would be fairly foolish not to open this up to a just nationwide search. You've got some juice right now. Go make it happen. Okay, I think that's going to wrap it up for us here on this 3-Ma. A little more happy than we would have been if we'd done a show on Monday coming off that Texas loss. We'll see what unfolds this weekend in Lubbock. 6 o'clock tip, I believe, between K-State and Texas Tech coming up on Saturday. So with that, drink your Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond bourbon while you watch, or your 360 vodka, whichever your poison of choice is. Support our friends at Holiday Distillery, who do a great job supporting the pod. We appreciate BJ Kissel behind the scenes today. For Derek Young and Cole Manbeck, I am John Kurtz. Thanks for listening to another 3-Ma. Take care.
Thanks for watching this production of KC Sports Network, the fastest growing sports media network in Kansas City. Check out these videos that feature our team of more than 15 former players, insiders, and analysts, bringing you the best Chiefs coverage you can find. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.